All right, Dr. Saab, with your permission, may I start now? We have decent number of participants and people will keep joining because sometimes they do have like internet connection issues and things like that.
Yes, please, whatever is suitable for you.
Okay, thank you so much. Assalamu alaikum, everyone. This is my greatest pleasure to welcome you all to this seminar. This is our second seminar in Learning Cafe. Our topic for today is higher education, post-normal musings. Today we are having Dr. Munawar Anis as our guest, and he's working as founding director of Center for Knowledge Futures and also editor-in-chief of Knowledge Futures. Knowledge Future is an interdisciplinary journal of future studies at UMT. Dr. Saab, thank you so much for taking out some time for us today and participating in this seminar. We are really fortunate to have you here. Before you start, I'll just tell you that we have like 1 hour in which you can talk about your musings for 40 minutes, and then 20 minutes will be for question answer sessions. We are also going live on Facebook. So before we start, could you really tell us the difference between how education is actually different from higher education? And before you dwell into your musings, can you also just a little bit describe your topic to us, post-normal musings? Thank you, sir. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Sadia. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Very warm welcome to all of you. First of all, let me tell you that Ms. Sadia Asif, I said Asif, is an acquaintance since the time I was the director of Institute of Communication and Cultural Studies at UMT. Unfortunately, we mispronounced this name as Asif. It is not Asif, it is Asif. And Asif is a Hebrew word. It's the name of Prophet Sulaiman alayhi salam. I think that correction was in order, as for you, Sadia, as well as for Asif Zardari Sahab.
Okay.
Anyway,
so be fortunate enough to know that he's not Asif, he's Asif.
Asif, yeah.
Right.
You know, Hebrew and Arabic, as you know, they are cognate languages belonging to Semitic group of language and so on. And they share a lot of vocabulary. Anyway, the topic of today's discussion is of my own choosing. That is, Sadia gave me the permission to do that, and so I did that. Before March 17th, life was normal, whatever that meant. So the topic says that post-normal, that means that when we were attacked by the pandemic, coronavirus. And in that context, I'll discuss the issue of higher education, that how the pandemic has affected the higher education. Of course, it has affected all of us in every walk of life, but my focus would be mainly on higher education. Within that, I will be addressing the issue, what I call the contingency of knowledge. That is, that knowledge has become contingent upon technique. Knowledge is no longer, I mean, it's no longer a distinction between deduction and induction, but in fact, we are all now, when it comes to discourse, when it comes to epistemological discourse, we are bound by the technique. It is the technique that leads us. Now, we all know what happened over the last 6 months, so I don't need to go into all those details, how it affected our economy, our social behavior, our psychology, and so on. Our main concern was that where people were gathering in massive numbers, like cinemas and theaters, dharnas, if you will, public gathering, sports arenas, and above all, educational institutions. So these areas were the most affected because people could not come together. They could not get together. So what did we do? We sought alternative, that is, to deliver instruction in an alternative way. As educators, what is our basic function, what is our basic duty, is to deliver instruction. So we thought that we will resort to online instruction. Well, online instruction is nothing new. It has been in practice for at least a number of decades, I would say. In Pakistan, for instance, we have virtual university. We have Allama Iqbal Open University. In England, you have Open University, UK. In America, the University of Phoenix, Arizona is totally devoted to online courses. So we immediately thought that, like the rest of the people in the world, we would also go for this alternative measure, that is online education. Now, it is very unfortunate that in this field, not much research has been done. Although as I said earlier, that we have been putting this in practice for a number of years. But how does this relate to instruction? How does it relate to students? What happens to faculty? Are they trained to deliver? And so on. What happens to the curriculum? What happens to the subject matter? That is social sciences versus natural sciences. In social sciences, yes, it is easier to go online. But what about chemistry and physics and biology and medicine and other areas? So there has been very little work done on that. But we had no recourse but to get into this. From technological perspective, I would say that in the early 60s, we were experimenting with systems like expert systems, we used to call them, or neural networks. And we did see the application within education of these technologies, as you will recall, mastery learning, where students were provided with consoles and, unless they will master that particular subject, the system will not allow them. So it was a sort of primitive sort of thing. Then we had the rise of what I call artificial intelligence. And again, artificial intelligence was, for a number of years, it remains in a limbo. The people were not really convinced that artificial AI can do its job. And because one of the major criticisms was that intuition plays a very significant role in learning. And I remember Robert Dreyfus was a very strong critic of AI. But gradually, as we developed related technologies, AI came into being, and it was successfully employed elsewhere. But still, it was not an answer to our problems, because we continue to believe that intuition plays a very significant role in knowledge advancement. Example, about 70 years ago, the discovery of DNA was not a deliberate act. It was by intuition. Watson and Crick, as you know, are the discoverers who got the Nobel for that. And one evening, when both of them were by the beach, Watson turned himself into a figure of 8. And that was the intuition that gave them the idea that, well, the structure of DNA could be a helical structure. So they rushed back to the lab. They did the what they call X-ray crystallography, and yes, there it was. So again, another example that I mean, this is another example of intuition, that intuition plays such a significant role. We emphasize on rote learning, and evaluation is based on rote learning, but there is very little that we leave to imagination, where students can learn or it can spark their imagination, so that leads to intuition. Yes, a substratum is required, the cognitive substratum is required, where intuition can work, but we stop short of providing them food for intuition. So the contingency of knowledge remains the fundamental issue in epistemology, in education, and wherever you go. Another example of contingency, that the predictive value of knowledge is no longer there. That is, the predictive value is, unless it is supported by appropriate technology. Example, Dr. Abdul Salam predicted way back, I believe in early 60s, about a subatomic particle that is called Higgs boson particle. And scientists or physicists also call it God particle, believing that if we discover that particle, we will come to understand the fabric of the cosmos. Well, this is all theoretical physics. You do not have, at that time, you did not have the appropriate technology to really test that prediction, to test that theory. Until and unless the LHC, that is Large Hadron Collider, which is like 27 kilometers long particle accelerator at the border of Germany and France, operated by the European Nuclear Energy Agency. Unless that was developed with billions of dollars of cost. And then years of research went into that. And finally, the Higgs boson particle was discovered. The God particle was discovered. And I think it was probably 3 years ago. So what I'm trying to say is that through these examples and through a very short historical narrative, that knowledge is no longer independent of technique. It is contingent upon technique. Why I'm emphasizing upon technique? Because in the face of pandemic, we survived because of an alternative technique. So we should understand that our problem is, or the problematique is basically the problem of technique. We may theorize anything about the cosmos, about whole thing, about human beings, or whatever you want to do, but it will not come to fruition unless the technique allows us to do that. And I'm using the word technique in a wider context, which we understand commonly as technology. So in this context, the appropriate technology was internet. Again, we have enormous amount of misunderstanding about internet. We believe that, well, it's on the internet, as if it is a panacea for every problem on earth. Well, it is not. You see, internet was basically developed by the Department of Defense American Department of Defense. And it was made public around mid-80s when it was put into the public domain and people started using it. I remember I got my first email address in 1986 when the first internet service providers came into being. So we believe that this technique, because again, it was the internet that provided us the facility for online instruction. It's a very serious issue in the sense that, first of all, we should understand that all knowledge that is there, only probably 10 to 15% of that information is on the net. So that means that we still have to rely upon the good old traditional libraries and other conventional sources of information. Second, and I derived this critique of internet from what we call Hadees methodology. If you bear with me, Hadees methodology is a very elaborate system of knowledge dissemination and criticism. Hadees, we call it ulum al-Hadees. It has given rise to at least 3-4 major disciplines. For instance, the biographical dictionaries rose out of the technique of ulum al-Hadees, which was called ilm al-Rijal. You know, Hadith has two parts. Like the first is like Qala Fulan ibn Fulan ibn Fulan, an qala Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. And then you have the text. So the first part is called sanad, the plural is isnad, and the second part is called matan. This methodology of ilm al-Rijal, and you will find that there are monumental books on ilm al-Rijal, like Kitabul Wafiatul Ayan of Ibn Khalil Khan and so on. Now, what they emphasize is the source of information, transmission of information, and the integrity of information, and the integrity of the informer. Now look at internet. What is it? It's a behemoth of information. It's a huge, if you may call, a huge bibliography. It's a monopoly these days. Okay, I mean, look at the search engines. What do they give you? Okay. Now, you're all familiar with 404. So the websites are here today, gone tomorrow. The reliability of information, the reliability index of information is very low. At the same time, of course, excluding the known reliable institutions from where you are getting the information. But otherwise, compared to the printed information, the digital information is highly unreliable. It is ephemeral. It is not permanent. Okay? So these are some of the pitfalls of internet. Another area where we see problem, and that is of plagiarism. Plagiarism has become an infectious disease. I mean, I remember reading, the Vice Chancellor of ComStat. He plagiarized his dissertation. Executive Director of HEC plagiarized his dissertation. President of HEC, Chairman of HEC also. So why plagiarism has proliferated? it has proliferated because of the easy access of information and easy manipulation of the text. So the reliability of information, the integrity of the informer, the integrity of the final text, they are all in doubt. And as I said, there are lessons for us when we get to Ulum al-Hadith that we should look at internet with a certain skepticism. The practice of integrity of information, integrity of the informer, that is critical to the transmission of knowledge. Because if during the course of transmission, if anything interferes with the text of the information, or the text that is being transmitted, that means for the next generations, we are leaving a body of knowledge which is not pristine. Okay, so again, I'm in trying to cite an example from Muslim history, and that is that the world's first Bio Bibliography was produced by none other than a Muslim. It is known as Al-Fahris of An-Nadim. You know, in olden days, we used to travel for the sake of knowledge. That is, that a rihla was considered more beneficial than kitaba. So people used to travel from one city to another, and they will visit those libraries. Now, there were, of course, no photocopiers and scanners and blah blah. So copying books was a profession. Many people were employed, like at Darul Hikmah in Baghdad. Many people were employed as what they used to call them warraq. So Nadim was one of the al-warraq, and his Bio Bibliography was compiled around 4th century Hijrah. So you can say about 1,000 years ago. And it was translated into English by Baird Dodge, I believe, in 1962. Columbia University published it in 2 volumes. You're amazed at the output of those people, the amount of work that they produced, and you see the entries in that monumental book. Ibn Nadim gives you a brief description of the author and then lists his books and so on. So my point is, first, as I mentioned, that I raised the issue, the philosophical issue of contingency of knowledge. That we should be aware, we should not take knowledge for granted. We should not take the received text as such. We should question it, number one. Number two, those who are believing that online alternative is the panacea for all our ills, they are totally wrong. One, on the disciplinary angle, that you cannot deal with all the disciplines. Yes, in certain disciplines, in social sciences, this could be possible. But what about archaeology, for instance? You can't be teaching archaeology online, and so on. So it's a very different story in natural sciences. Perhaps mathematics could go with that, but others cannot be. And thirdly, that the technique that has come to us as an alternative is fraught with all kinds of danger. So there is a hype about the internet that we need to minimize. That yes, it is a learning aid, nothing more than that. Internet is at once an enabling technology, and a disruptive technology. Enabling technology that whatever material has been digitized in the libraries of the world, that is available to you instantly. You don't need to visit to the library and so on and so forth. But at the same time, I'm sure you're familiar with the ills of social media and how the abuses are occurring and so on and so forth. So these are some of the fundamental points that we should remember. Now, those people who are arguing that now, even in the post-normal period or post-COVID-19 era, we can go or we can shift all the way to online learning. I think they are mistaken. If at all there be a prevalence of online technology, I would believe that the higher education of the future would be a hybrid. That is, you will have certain courses that you can teach online, whereas you can go for other courses in the conventional way. There is no other choice. Even within the online domain, where we have identified certain fundamental problems, the biggest problem is of teacher-student interaction, peer-to-peer interaction. Because the online environment, like I myself do not feel comfortable delivering this Zoom lecture. I'm constrained. I'm in the habit of writing on the blackboard or whiteboard. I'm in the habit of walking around in the lecture halls. I want to see everybody in front of me. Maybe ask somebody a question or something like that. Invite their participation. So there are so many things. I'm sure all of you have your own style of teaching. So it restricts student-teacher interaction very severely. There are limits to peer-to-peer interaction, and of course there are limits to the instructor, because instructors themselves are not prepared or have not been given preparation or enough instruction to handle the online environment. We just saw that, we can switch on the Zoom, so we can just deliver the lecture. So it's not like that, okay? So then the other thing that to me is critically important, and that is, as a consequence of dehumanization, we are being deprived of the values in education. Again, I go back to Islamic history, and I would recommend all of you, those who are listening attentively, that please get hold of a book called Technique and Approach of Muslim Scholarship. It is written, it's a short book, probably 120 pages. It was published in 1948. And guess who published it? It was published by Institutum Pontificum Biblicum. That is the institute that publishes directly under the Pope. I had a hell of a time locating that book because it was not, published by a commercial publisher. But anyway, now that book tells you something about how Muslim scholars married values with knowledge. You must have heard the common phrase, ilm or amal. So ilm without amal was never considered acceptable. Abstract knowledge, yes. I mean, you have, on the one hand, you have Ibn Rushd, and on the other hand, you have Imam Ghazali, okay? So it was a marriage of these two that gave Islamic civilization what it was. So I think as we move towards I'm sure this is inevitable that we will move to a hybrid situation, okay, sooner or later. But I would say that the problem of value clarification would be accentuated in that environment more than ever before. Because earlier we were following the conventional system. But now there is a new entrant, and that is of online. So the dehumanization factor increases manifold. So I would say that please consider consider bringing the values back in. And I would again mention a book by a Muslim scholar of I think 8th century, and that has been translated into English. It is called Kitab al-Ta'lim wal-Muta'allim. That is the book of education and educator. Okay? So take inspiration from this type of literature and bring back those values. Okay? And remember that we must not take technology as our master. Instead, we should understand the soul and spirit of technology so that we can mold that technology to our needs and not be led by technology. Okay? Similarly, you need to emphasize to the students the secondary nature of internet, auxiliary nature of internet. It is not fundamental. You should emphasize, like I'm sure that many students, because of going to the internet, they have forgotten or they have not even known what is a card catalog or how to search a book in a library. And that goes on and on, okay? Like for advanced students, for instance, the issue of, the dissertation protocol, that how do you follow this manual, style manual, APA manual, or MLA manual, and so on and so forth. So these are very critical issues. So unless, as educators, we tell our students that online or offline, you should understand the spirit of it and then follow what is being taught, not mindlessly that, okay, I press the button, I get it, and I download it, and I cut and paste, and everything will be fine. No, it's not like that. Of the values, I believe one of the most important values to me is humility. If one begins to believe that he or she knows everything, I think that's the beginning of ignorance. Humility opens door to knowledge. Humility is submission. You submit that yes, you do not know, and that you want to know. You are submitting that you want to know. You are humble enough to admit that you do not know. And it's a fact that we really, really do not know. And this reminds me of a share by Ustad Zauq. He said that हम जानते थे इल्म से कुछ पाएंगे, हम जानते थे इल्म से कुछ पाएंगे, जाना तो ये जाना कि ना जाना कुछ. See? हम जानते थे इल्म से कुछ पाएंगे, जाना तो ये जाना कि ना जाना कुछ.
Very good.
So with that, I think I come to an end to my rumblings. Any question? Because I believe the interaction brings more rather than a monologue. Please.
Gee, any question from the audience? I hope your mics are okay.
Because I was given 40 minutes, so I thought I will not take more time.
Yeah. So, sir, as you were saying that we are just quite overwhelmed by the technology, and
Sadia Asif,
Ji, sir. Ji, Dr. Saab, please go ahead.
No. If you have any question, please continue, and I can ask later.
नहीं सर, आप कर लें, उसके बाद I'll do that later on.
All right. I'm grateful for providing me this opportunity to attend this wonderful seminar. It's truly learning cafe, and if you know the word cafe, I always think of if Sadia will take us take
The audio is, I cannot hear. Yeah.
Dr. Saab, Dr. Shaban, you'll have to repeat
and offer a
yourself.
cup of coffee.
Yes,
and Dr. Munawar is sitting with us, and we are enjoying his conversation. And that take me to a different context, and context of learning, and probably this is what Dr. Anis has right away from. Let me fix my internet. I guess there might be internet connectivity.
Yeah, the audio is choppy. Your audio is choppy.
So here we can see an example that how we cannot depend so much on technology.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. Yes. You caught it just at the right time. Yeah. Reliability is not there.
Reliability is not there, exactly.
Anyway, you were saying something.
I was just commenting on it. Like earlier, before this pandemic, things were like there were so many schools, even in US and in developed countries, they were trying to go online because they really wanted to include or have more students, and they didn't have more resources. They didn't have enough teachers, and they did not have enough place. So they were trying to go online, and people were really reluctant, and parents were actually very reluctant, because I remember even my sister was given this choice that would you like to take your kids online, because we are offering online courses too, and we are also doing face-to-face in a school, in a public and private schools. So I believe that now probably this transition will be more quick, and people will feel, or parents are getting more comfortable with the idea that, well, yes, we can go online. And when it comes to values, imparting values through this education system, I believe that is going to be somehow compromised by this new way of teaching and new way of disseminating knowledge. It's just a comment, but it's going to be very quick, and we will see a lot of people will be choosing online courses now.
Yeah, I would say you are partially correct, and that selection would be out of convenience, not really out of any intellectual shift. And right now, for instance, the social acceptance of online degrees will increase. I mean, you know, before that, if you come up with a degree that you got from Allama Iqbal Open University, people will not pay enough recognition to that. So I think that social recognition will increase, certainly. But as I said, to believe that the transition would be total and full towards online, I think that's a mistake. It's just not possible. As I said, the major disciplinary distinction that is between natural and social sciences, just because of that, it's not possible. Even at the school level, I mean, what to talk of higher education, even at the school level, it won't be possible. Because at school, yes, out of convenience, people will say, well, I don't have to drive the kids to school, so that's fine. They can turn on the Zoom and attend their classes. That's fine. But even at that level, where, I mean, students need much more interaction with the teacher at that lower level than say at master's or doctoral level. Yes, it will increase, but not phenomenally, but to a certain level. Because, like other day I was reading that US immigration has asked those students who are enrolled in online courses to go home because they're not attending classes, you see. So Harvard and a couple of other universities, they brought a suit against that no, that's not proper, and blah, blah, blah. So there are several other problems. I mean, logistical issues will arise. And then, of course, the reach of the internet, the penetration of the bandwidth, and what kind of bandwidth would be available. I know that I experienced a lot of problems during the peak of this pandemic, where a lot of people were using online, and my Zoom connection was not working properly.
Gee, Dr. Shaban, are you back?
G. Yeah, I'm back, and I'm audible. I think I have an internet issue, connectivity issue, and what Dr. Anis rightly has pointed out. So if my voice is not breaking, then I can ask a question.
Yeah, go ahead. I hear you well.
For your wonderful conversation and wonderful talk. I want to ask one very quick question, and then the rest will be based on that. You made a statement on digital information is highly unreliable. Would you please comment on this? What makes you think that digital information is highly unreliable?
Yeah. You see, if you look at the number of web pages, for instance, they run into billions and billions, right? Now, I say they are unreliable unless, and I said that, unless the source is reliable. For instance, if there is an information that is coming out from UMT, there is a web page, we know that it's reliable. But there are lots of jokers on the internet who are putting out material, who are mixing text from one to another, who are bringing out, like, see, take the case of a printed book. You have several editions of a book, and you can distinguish between that. But if you digitize a book and you mix the text of different editions into one, you have no way of knowing who is doing that and how that is possible. So the issue of reliability is there. The issue of integrity is there. That unless the source is reliable, unless you know the integrity of the source, do not just trust the internet, whatever appears on the internet, to be true. No, it is not.
All right. Dr. Saab, as you have rightly pointed out, like internet has given a copy paste, and you have referred to AGCG. On the other hand, internet has provided us plagiarism. I mean, this is all digital.
I lost you. No, I didn't get him. Did you hear?
No, we couldn't really get him. Dr. Saab, like you've been talking about getting knowledge from intuitions, and students can actually learn from their imaginations also. Can you really give us more example on this? Because we are having young teachers here, how we can make our students learn from their intuitions. We do not rely on rote learning. How we can actually do that?
If you ask them to memorize, if you insist on rote learning, of course not. Create a situation where their imagination is sparked, where they get imaginative sparks. Ask them to think of the impossible. Ask them to think of the unforeseen. And you will see that they will begin to think and they will come up with something. You see? But if you insist only on the rote facts, that when Emperor Akbar died, tell me the date. No, that's dumb. Okay, so I think the secret is in inspiring students to think aloud, to think out of the box, and be much more imaginative. That is, could it be done otherwise? Could it be done this way? What would happen if this goes like that? So I think that would give students a lot of opportunity to really jog their imagination. Yeah.
So our classroom environment and our classroom decorum, does that actually allow us to letting our student rely on their intuition?
It should. It should. Because if we ourselves continue to copycat the curriculum, and we ourselves do not take the initiative, actually the initiative is in the hands of the teacher, not in the hands of students. Okay? If they say that, okay, I'm going to teach this way, I'm not going to simply throw out the data, but in a different way, in a different manner, from a different angle, I'm sure that this can be taken care of. So it is also the imagination, the imaginative capacity of the teacher to take the subject to its heights.
So is it really still very important that we send our students to the library and then they should know how to search a book from the catalog instead of sending them to the online database, and they should know how they can search a book from the database?
Okay, good question. Do you know how many journals are published in Pakistan?
Not in numbers, but there's so many.
So they are around 400 and plus, yeah.
Right? I'm going to tell you that this business of impact factor and ranking and indexing and abstracting is one of the biggest frauds. Tell me how many journals are indexed by Western indexing services from this part of the world, the so-called third world. Very few. I say that you die a bibliographic debt if you are not cited. You die a bibliographic debt if you are not cited, and you are not cited because you are not indexed. So this is a fundamental issue here, that these are knowledge monopolies, and we should understand their working. Indices are based on source material. If your source material from this part of the world is not included, then those indices are incomplete. I challenge you, in the area of Islamic studies, go to an indexing service. There is one called Index Islamicus. Look at their coverage. Islamic literature is published in more than 70 languages. Can you find me an Uzbek book from that index? That, you know, Uzbek is an Islamic language. Can you find me a Swahili collection of books from that index? No.
No.
So it is to perpetuate, you see, that those indices, those impact factor tools, the Web of Science and this and that and Scopus and whatnot, okay, those are tools of domination. Those are tools of control. I'm sure if I ask you, name, Sadia, name 10 journals in your field, and you will mention Cambridge, Oxford, Penn, California, whatever, okay? But you probably will not be able to mention a single journal, except that of maybe Shaban. Why? Because your literature is not indexed. Because we are moving away from library usage. Our library usage habits are decreasing or becoming extinct. We are just relying upon whatever is being given to us by Google. And Google is run by a controlled thesaurus. That thesaurus leaves out many things that belong to us, that define us. So we are left out, and we are defined by the terms and technology of the West, and not by our own literature, not by our own production. I would request that if you people have not gone before, go to a website called archive.org. And
Can you repeat it?
Archive.org.
Archive.org.
Now, just type the word Urdu there, okay? And you will discover absolutely rare books which have been scanned, which have been acquired. First, which have been acquired. Do you know that Library of Congress maintains field offices all over the world? Their job is to acquire the books in local languages. I always get my Urdu books from Library of Congress and not from Lahore National Library, because there is no way of doing it. So if you train your students in using alternative ways of exploring knowledge beside internet or within internet, okay? Just don't rely upon, google.com and then you just enter your keywords. The keywords themselves have their own bias. There are certain keywords which will yield very few results because of the nature of the thesaurus, the controlled thesaurus that runs Google. And do you know that there is localization of search engines? What is localization of search engines? Localization of search engines is that when you enter a query, the system identifies your IP address. It tells him that, well, this guy is coming from Pakistan, okay? So they throw in the material that is not European, not American, not universal, but related to Lahore, Karachi, and Peshawar. And you think that you have done a fantastic job. No, you haven't done anything.
Thank you for such a comprehensive answer on it, and a very good and awakening explanation Thank you so much. And Shaban Sab, you are audible now. Would you
Yeah,
like?
I'm so sorry. Though I have 4G, but it is just a 4G for the namesake. But there is always connectivity issue. So when I'm connected from home, and so my apologies to Dr. Munawar for
That's fine.
inconvenience. But I guess I'm sure I'm audible now. I
Yes, you
completely
are.
agree with you. The control on knowledge, how knowledge is being disseminated to us as a scholar of third world or Pakistan, as you have rightly said. Currently, if we divide the world into knowledge stream, most of the publication houses are either owned by United States of America or United Kingdom, are just very few, like 5 to 6% by Australia, Germany, and some other European countries. So, Dr. Saab, what we should do in our higher education, that one day we can also claim somehow as a knowledge producer. HEC is currently publishing 400 journals, but you rightly said that there is hardly any which is indexed by top-notch indexing agencies. There are very few. So how we can increase this, quality of knowledge production, and we can also join the mainstream of knowledge. Yes.
You see, it's a very involved question. The point is this, that I'm sure you're familiar with predatory journals.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah.
Okay, first of all, we should make sure that our students, no matter where they come from and what are their objectives, that they must not be allowed to publish in predatory journals, because that perpetuates a system that is very dangerous. You think of 5 decades from now, a researcher who goes into a literature search and finds a bunch of predatory articles in predatory journals, which have fake data, okay, which have modulated information. What sort of research would that person be conducting based on that kind of data? One thing is that we should be making our doctoral students or MPhil students to be very much aware of predatory journals. What are they? How do you identify them, and so on? Which means that we should publish only in journals which are recognized. I strongly contest HEC system of this W and all this alphabet soup that they have created. This category, W category, Y category, X category. This is nothing but a blind imitation of the control of the Western publishing empire. Okay? They are not aware of the debate about the pitfalls of impact factor. They are not aware of the critique of the publishers, of the publishing empires which are there, like Elsevier, for instance. Okay? They are not aware of the new movements, like Creative Commons, okay, as compared to those journals which are behind the paywalls. Okay? So one thing is that we need to create an awareness about the mechanism of publishing, that what it really is. Okay? Well, how can we get hold of that? Secondly, we should reject this, pardon me for saying stupid classification, W, X, Y, Z. Who recognized that classification? And what is the basis of that? And they have some Gora Sahab sitting there who will say that 2 foreign universities. Why foreign universities? It should be merit-based, not race-based. Okay? Thirdly, and most importantly, we have to produce our own journals, our own journals of quality, where we emphasize the best practices, Best practices by author, best practices by reviewers, best practices by referees, best practices by publishers. Only then we can compete. Otherwise, we'll remain in limbo, as we have been for so many decades.
Right.
That's good.
Thank you. Any other comment or question from the audience?
Okay, just one more comment. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you, Fatma.
Okay, thank you so much, Dr. Munawwar, for pointing out something which I feel very strongly about. The point is, I think I completely agree that we have to live under conditions which are monopolized by the West. But the point is that in the system in which we are working, we don't have any choice. We only get recognized when we get published in the journals which we otherwise cannot have access to for reading. So we are living in a system which is unjust. And are we in a position to challenge the HEC policies? And this is what I've been thinking. And I think this pandemic situation, it is about time that we reflect on what we have been doing and maybe think of alternatives which are more empowering. And but I keep on thinking, because the system in which we are working currently, we have to follow the HEC policies blindly, which is, I think, double blind, because they copy from the West and then we have to follow their instructions. So what is your take on that? How can we go about it? How can we challenge the system?
Yeah, I understand your predicament, Fatima. The point is this, that the HEC has no business in dictating us the journal policy. How many editors are on their board who can evaluate those editorial policies which they have announced and which they try to enforce?
It's true.
I think the best approach would be to boycott those policies. Not submit your journals to HEC for what? I mean, there is some moron bureaucrat sitting there. How can he or she evaluate your editorial skills? How can they evaluate your editorial output? They cannot. And what is the rationale for, again, for this XYW, XYZ categories? Okay?
True.
So instead of that, we should have a board of editors, a national board of editors, if at all there needs to be, okay? Like Committee for Publication Ethics has, okay? You have a diverse group of editors. An editor of a social science journal has different requirements and different challenges as opposed to a journal from natural sciences. So I think that there should be a sort of movement or whatever where HEC should be made to believe that this is none of their business to dictate us editorial policies or to evaluate us on editorial matters. This should be left to a national board of editors, okay?
Absolutely,
who
yes.
will guide and direct and implement those policies. And this system of tagging XYZ is totally ridiculous. It is unacceptable. And not only that, look at their penetration. I mean, they have based this XYZ categorization and tied it to the promotions, to increments. I mean, this is so ridiculous. That you must publish in HEC recognized journal. Now, HEC recognition standards are not universal standards.
Right.
They are subject to severe criticism. And does anybody outside Pakistan accept HEC system of recognition? Hell no.
So what do we do about it? I think right now, can we change something at our university level? Because
I think
when I make an effort towards
I think at our university, people should be, I mean, those who are running the store, they should be told that this university should come up with a journal editorial policy which is in line with universal standards and which is completely cognizant of the word standards and its critique. Like they should start with Committee on Publication Ethics, for instance, okay? And take the best practices. And I would go ahead and say that Islamize those practices. For instance,
I completely agree, yes.
Well, I mentioned in the context of Hadees methodology, which is irrefutable, that how Hadees methodology applies, I mean, how you can evaluate internet on the basis of Hadees methodology. That is Ilm al-Rijal alone. Do you know what is Ilm al-Rijal, what I mean by that?
Yes, you just explained and I noted it down. And yes, it's important that you know the integrity of the people who are giving us
the journal publishing system in our university is completely out of hand. It has no head or tail. This needs to be streamlined, okay, by the people who have knowledge, by the people who have experience of publishing, by the people who have editorial expertise, okay? And then come up with a coherent policy. Distinguish yourself in terms of that and show the mirror to HEC.
Yes. So we need to educate the system in which we are working. So
yes,
I think
precisely.
Right. Thank you.
Well, with this, our time come to an end. Any last comment or question? Because we are almost done here.
Oh, yeah.
Sadia, I have a request, like if we can have such seminar on campus, then because now campus is open. And I wonder, if we can have a round of such seminar on campus where we can sit together, maybe, small audience, but that can also be very productive. And it's a wonderful listening to Dr. Hadees. This was my first, participation in his seminar, and but I really enjoyed. Thank you.
Inshallah, I will be organizing some of the seminars in campus where we will be recording too, so that the larger audience could also get benefit out of it. So I will be, I'm thinking on it, and inshallah soon I'll start doing that. With this, I would say thank you so much, Dr. Munawwar Hadees, for your time, and we are really honored to have you here today, and you have really tried to have given us a very thought-provoking session, and it was nice and lovely to hear you. And you have clarified a lot of our concerns and given more spark to the intellect and our imagination. Thank you once again, and thank you all the audience for being here.
Thank you all for joining us. Thank you.
Thank you. Allah Hafiz, everyone.